Hi everyone, Amy here, just checking in on what we've done in discussions so far this week. So far I think everything looks good. I'll have somewhat different feedback on the two discussions that are going on because they looked pretty different, but I'll get to that in just a second. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our to-do list for this week, your lecture materials and your reading matrices, the discussions I'll be talking about, and I'm still working on grading your campaign analysis essays. And then again, I do apologize for being a little MIA at the end of last week. I was under the weather and I provided some more extensive feedback on last week's discussions in my end of week wrap-up videos, which are posted here in the news as well. So let's go ahead and jump into our discussions for this week. We'll start with the writing prompt discussion that y'all are currently working on, which is our last writing prompt of the semester, so congratulations. We had good participation so far with the original posts, and I'm excited to see what y'all come up with for each other in your comments for tomorrow night. In general, I'm feeling really good about the thesis statements that you put up in this discussion. For the most part, all of you were able to execute the surprising reversal structure, and I have just a few kind of tweaks that I would suggest. And then most of you are also even beginning to work in your supporting points to attach to your claim as well for your true comprehensive thesis. So I'll try to give some feedback that'll support you as you work on that as well. So as I said, most of the examples that I saw you all had posted here were rather successful, but I do have just a few suggestions. One is to be sure to use a reversal transition in between the counter argument and your position. It's not enough to just say the other point of view, then your point of view right next to each other, because your reader might still be unclear as to which point of view you are actually arguing for. Now, it might seem obvious because, you know, typically you do give the counter argument first and then give your own argument the last word, but you just want to make that distinction really clear. That's what transitions are for, and you don't want to kind of burden your reader by leaving it up to them to interpret the relationship between those alternative points of view. So make sure that you really focus on the persuasive purpose of your argument by using signal phrases to show this is what the other people think versus this is what I am arguing for. So one example that I thought did that very successfully here was Amber's. Amber says social media is a big hit nowadays with movies, media sites, and magazines. That's kind of just an intro background statement, I think. And then Amber says, some say that they are trying to show that no matter what your size and no matter what you do with your life, you are perfect just the way you are. In reality, the many advertisements and stereotypes that the media is displaying are causing depression, unhealthy self-image, and unhealthy eating habits. The messages that social media should be displaying is empowerment and being healthy and being yourself. So the transitions are here. Some say that these media outlets are trying to show this, when in reality, these are the actual negative effects that they're causing. So this does a really good job of showing what the alternative perspective is here, and then what this person, Amber, is going to be arguing for in her actual claim. And then Amber, you do a good job mapping out your main points as to why this is a problem or your supporting reasons here. The only suggestion I would have is to then use a further transition or signal phrase as you move into the proposal part of your claim or the solution that you're offering here at the end, by using a word like therefore or thus, or something that's going to signal that this action is a consequence of the problem points that you've outlined previously. But otherwise, good job. The other thing I want to specify is just regarding your claims in general. Remember that your thesis statement is going to somehow be an answer to that research question that you came up with last week. And so in as much as it's an answer to your question, your thesis should actually be a statement and not a question itself. Nikki's, I thought, was a good example of this because when she first posted, she had kind of alluded to her claim by asking some questions here, but not really come right out and stated her claim. And then she came back last night before the deadline and put her actual statement of her actual claim here as a kind of revision. So many people might believe that assisted suicide is morally and ethically wrong, believing that there are always alternative methods in healing. And then down here, when there are no other alternatives but to suffer and time is all that's left, it should be up to the person to decide when they wish to lay their head to rest. So this is somewhat pathological language. I would say maybe just be a little more direct because you're writing for the academic community, or excuse me, they're paying to rest. And then, of course, as I just mentioned, you would need to have a reversal transition attaching the statement of your claim to the counterargument here, something like however, or in reality, like we saw in the last example, or I saw several of you using the word actually, or something like that, just to show that in reality, this is the position that I am actually arguing for. And then, Nikki, you would just need to attach your supporting points to this claim as well to make it complete. So I guess that's the next thing I'll touch on, is just don't forget that your thesis needs to be comprehensive of all the primary components of your argument, so all the supporting points that you're going to be developing throughout the body of your essay. One that I thought that did a really good job with that was Luke's here. Let's see, he has some intro background information here as well, but then he jumps right into his claim. Many people might believe that the BP oil spill only caused negative effects on the Gulf. However, someone could argue that there are some positives that came to light because of the spill. For instance, some positives could be revised interest in the Gulf, increase in environmental concern, BP becoming a safer company and sharing what they learn with other companies. Overall, the BP oil spill did result in negative effects, which have not been fully restored, but some positives did result. So this is kind of an evaluative claim, but does a really good job outlining what exactly those supporting points are going to be as to why this is actually a good thing. And I think you have actually 4 separate points here, Luke, so that should give you plenty to work with for your paper. Now, one thing I would suggest here is that you have a lot to get into your thesis, especially if you're using surprising reversal, you have some supporting points, and then you have an overall evaluative or proposal claim that kind of culminates in. And what I would challenge all of you to do is try to work really hard to condense everything down so that your thesis is more of a 1 to 2 sentence statement as opposed to kind of a extensive series of sentences or even moving toward a full-on paragraph. I know that's not necessarily easy to do the first time you're getting your draft of your thesis down, and that's fine, but in your revision I would say that's something to focus on, is try to get it down to just a couple of sentences by listing your points very briefly there in the thesis. You don't have to go super in depth with your points or explain them at all in the thesis. That's why you have those later body paragraphs where you're going to explain each of the points. You can just kind of list them briefly in your thesis. So Jessica's was another example of that, a thesis that I think is really strong and comprehensive and does a great job with surprising reversal, by the way. But as you can see here, it's kind of moving into more like a paragraph as opposed to a concise, kind of compact and discrete statement. So one of the reasons for that is because you can see here that each of the points is getting a complete sentence. So there's actually the counterargument here, 2 sentences to set up the reasons, then individual sentences for each reason, and then finally the overall evaluative claim. So I would just go straight from the counterargument into the reasons in a list as opposed to individual sentences for each one, and then make a statement of your overall central claim, which in this case is an evaluation. So I would say work on that as you all keep revising these thesis statements and working towards your rough draft for the workshop discussion next week. And then those were my primary comments on the thesis statements themselves. We just have a couple of replies thus far this week, which is fine because the deadline's not till tomorrow night. But I would suggest making sure that your comments to each other focus on counter arguments, because this is really an opportunity for you all to bounce ideas off each other and suggest to each other what might be some alternate perspectives that maybe the original writer hadn't initially thought of. The whole point of surprising reversal is to get those big major counter arguments that are going to be distracting your readers right from the start out of the way. And so if you can help each other brainstorm what some of those counter arguments might be, or if there's another counter argument that this person hasn't thought of yet, you can really help each other by suggesting those things. And I thought Horatio's comment to Nikki here was one good example of that, or excuse me, Rocky's comment to Nikki. Rocky says, It's true that the dating world has changed a bit with online dating, but it hasn't made dating vanish. However, I would argue the popular belief or stigma that people who don't online date have about those who do, which leads people to believe that those who do online date or do online dating are desperate, hopeless, or can't get a real date. That seems to be the popular stereotype against people who are dating online. And so I thought this was a good example of kind of a commonly held popular belief that hadn't been addressed yet in this surprising reversal statement. So you might want to, this is a really good comment, you might want to emulate this when you are commenting on one another's original posts in the next couple of days. Okay, so let's jump real quick into your open discussions. I can see that most of you haven't gotten very far with this one yet, but we do have several original posts. Remember, for open discussions, we're only doing 3 originals, but in this case we have 4. That's all right. I'm certainly not going to complain about you doing the work, but it just encourages more replies if you can kind of stop at the limit of 3 originals and focus then more on your replies. I would say that overall, the biggest thing I notice is that several of your topics are changing. So both Jessica and Luke, you've kind of shifted topics here. I think Jessica, you might have run this by me already, but Luke, this seems very different from what you posted about in the writing prompt for this week. So I would just be curious as to why you chose to write about something different and which direction you're actually going for your discussion. So if you want to email me about that, that would be great. But otherwise, I think Amber's and Katie's were right on from what they had posted and matched up nicely with the writing prompt for this week. So good job. In general, you are all doing a good job addressing the requirements of the prompt there and what it's asking you to do. Jessica, I thought that your outline was really interesting. It's kind of more of a visual outline as opposed to a hierarchical sentence level outline or an outline that would map out your paragraphs, but it's a good start for this phase in the writing process. Obviously, this part's correct. I'm not really sure how this is going to break down into paragraphs in your essay, but I'm assuming that you're just kind of trying to get your thoughts in order here, so that's fine. But one thing I would suggest is that you want to make sure not to give equal consideration to both sides. This will be your counter argument, but you need to put the emphasis on what you are actually calling for in your own actual claim, so I would watch out for that. But I will say that there's a really good conversation going on in this thread, and so this is definitely what I'm looking for when I say put the emphasis on your replies in the open discussion. Luke checked in with Jessica here, and then Jessica and Luke have a really nice back and forth that keeps going because they are not just walking away from the discussion, they're actually continuing to keep the conversation moving forward, so I thought that was great. And then also Nikki's post here is a really good example of what I mean when I say put as much effort into your replies as you do into your originals, because Nikki has attached her own nutshelling exercise as an attachment in reply to Jessica's original. So Nikki is doing basically all the prompts, although Nikki, you've left out the outline, herself, and then there's kind of a comparison contrast here, and then anyone who comes in to reply can look at Jessica's, can look at Nikki's, can look at Luke's and Jessica's exchange here, and how the ideas have been modified through the thinking that's going on in this discussion, and then even post your own outline and maybe offer feedback to your peers or ask them questions about how you might improve your own. So I think this particular thread has a lot of potential to be a really productive discussion for everyone. So good job with that, Nikki, Luke, and Jessica. And then the other thing that I just wanted to remind you all of is that your purpose is actually to persuade. So I know that several of you were answering question 3 here and saying, you know, maybe to inform or to educate, but actually you are trying to motivate your readers to believe, think, or do something different from what they would have originally planned to. And I saw that here in Amber's where she says, the purpose of my paper is to change social media. And that totally matches up with the proposal claim that she offered in the writing prompt discussion for this week. And so this is more along the lines of what I want you to have in mind when you're writing. Your goal here is actually to change your reader's point of view, or if you even have a proposal claim, you might be trying to make some action happen, which is what I think that Amber is getting at there. So overall, a great start this week. Please keep up the good work. Don't forget to do your replies over the next few days and email me if you have any questions. Thanks.